X-15, Flight 365-97. November 15, 1967. U.S. Air Force Major Michael J. Adams prepared for his 7th X-15 rocket plane flight at Edwards Air Force Base. Adams, a highly skilled test pilot, was in contention to join NASA Astronaut Corps. The X-15 was designed to probe the margin between atmospheric flight and true space flight, reaching the edge of Earth's atmosphere. On Flight 365-97, Adams aimed to climb to 250,000 feet, test a new ultraviolet camera, and evaluate attitude controls. Release from a B-52 at 45,000 feet went smoothly. Adams ignited the engine, climbing at 3,800 mph. At peak altitude 266,000 feet, he became the first person to die during a spaceflight. A yaw control malfunction started trouble. At thin upper altitudes, Adams didn't sense problems until it was too late. The X-15 entered a slow, fatal spin. Adams struggled to regain control, but high-speed aerodynamic forces overwhelmed all flight systems. Ground controllers lost contact, plasma swirling around the craft. As X-15 descended, its extreme angle meant it was facing sideways over 3,000 mph into denser air. The stress brought the plane to its breaking point. At 65,000 feet and Mach 3.5, the aircraft ripped itself apart under more than 15 gs. Adams likely lost consciousness before the breakup. Soyuz 11 crew. On June 6, 1971, cosmonauts Georgy Dobrovolsky, Vladislav Volkov, and Viktor Petsayev soared into history aboard Soyuz 11, on a mission to dock with Salyut 1, the world's first operational space station. Dobrovolsky, Volkov, and Petsayev were considered some of the best: a commander, a flight engineer, and a research scientist, pioneers set to prove humans could live and work in orbit for weeks. Their launch worked perfectly. Within hours, they docked and became the first humans on a space station. For 22 days, they set endurance records, conducted dozens of experiments from astronomy and biology to materials processing and photography. Their reports to ground control remained upbeat and professional. Mission goals were smashed. Extra science was squeezed in by request. On June 29th, after a spectacular mission, the crew sealed the hatches and prepared for return. Departing Salyut 1, Soyuz 11 separated from the station and began re-entry. All systems read normal. The heat shield performed flawlessly. The parachutes deployed right on schedule. Soft landing rockets fired, and Soyuz 11 settled gently onto the Kazakh steppe at 2:17 a.m. Rescue teams arrived to celebrate 3 record breakers. But when they opened the hatch, all 3 men were dead blue FAA'd, motionless, strapped in their seats. No trauma. No fire. Medical examiners found the cause. As Soyuz 11 separated from its modules, an explosive bolt or debris damaged the cabin pressure valve. The valve opened too early, venting the cabin atmosphere into the vacuum of space at 550,000 feet. Depressurization was nearly instant. Within 112 seconds, the crew lost consciousness and died of hypoxia. Without pressure suits, they never stood a chance. In the aftermath, the Soviets changed spacecraft forever. Reinforced valves, mandatory spacesuits for launch and re-entry, a rule that stands to this day. The Soyuz 11 crew are honored with memorials where they fell, their mission a sobering lesson in the dangers of vacuum. Columbia disaster. STS-107. On January 16, 2003, Space Shuttle Columbia launched from Kennedy. 7 astronauts embarked on STS-17, a research mission, not to the ISS, but to perform 80 on-orbit experiments. The crew: Rick Husband, William McCool, Kalpana Chawla, David Brown, Laurel Clark, Michael Anderson, and Ilan Ramon, the first Israeli in space. During ascent, cameras caught a chunk of foam insulation breaking free and hitting the left wing. The debris, much larger than usual, struck a critical section. NASA engineers debated the risk, but, recalling past foam incidents, failed to take drastic action. Requests for clear satellite images were denied. NASA believed even with damage, there was no repair option in orbit. The crew worked tirelessly, unaware their shuttle was fatally wounded. On February 1st, Columbia fired its OMS engines for re-entry. At over 17,000 mph, sparks of plasma began seeping through a hole in the carbon panels on the left wing, quickly raising the temperature inside past 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit. Sensors reported odd data, but the astronauts continued re-entry protocols. By 8:59 a.m. EST, as Columbia flew over Texas at 207,000 feet, the left wing tore free. The shuttle spun violently and broke up. Pieces scattered over Texas and Louisiana. The crew compartment shattered. All 7 astronauts were killed instantly. Investigations brought major changes. Mandatory thermal inspections before re-entry, new abilities and tools to repair damage in orbit, and a deep examination of NASA's safety policies. Vladimir Komarov, Soyuz 1. On April 22, 1967, Vladimir Komarov walked down the cold corridors of the Baikonur Cosmodrome, knowing full well he was embarking on a suicide mission. Komarov was a seasoned cosmonaut, the first to fly twice, and had been assigned to pilot Soyuz 1, the Soviet Union's new spacecraft trust to beat America's Apollo program. But Komarov knew what the public didn't. Friend and first man in space, Yuri Gagarin had tried desperately to stop the launch. More than 200 technical hazards had been logged during tests, flaws in the parachute system, unstable attitude control, even a faulty heat shield. Soviet engineers filed report after report, but the Kremlin pressed ahead. For them, hitting Lenin's birthday and May Day with a successful flight was more important than safety. Komarov faced an agonizing choice. If he refused, Gagarin would take his place. Komarov could not let that happen. He boarded Soyuz 1 in the early pre-dawn, April 23, 1967. Soon after launch, disaster struck. A solar panel failed to deploy, slashing power in half. That created a domino effect. Soyuz 1 batteries drained quickly, and ion sensors jammed. The craft spun wild through space. Komarov fought desperately to stabilize his ship. Ground control watched with rising panic. A planned rendezvous with Soyuz 2 was canned instantly. Another crew almost doomed. After 18 desperate orbits, controllers ordered Komarov to attempt an emergency re-entry. Descending into the upper atmosphere, Komarov relied on safety systems that had already failed him. The heat shield worked at first, but at 23,000 feet the main parachute container stuck shut. A flaw engineers had flagged months prior. The chute tangled in its case, providing no drag. Komarov triggered the backup parachute. It instantly tangled with the main, forming a useless knot. As he tumbled at 250 mph, Soviet listening posts caught Komarov's last transmission, cursing the engineers and officials who forced him into a defective ship, realizing he had less than a minute to live. Soyuz 1 struck the ground near Orenburg at 7:24 a.m., flattening the descent module into a disk only a meter high. Flames consumed what remained. Komarov's body fused with the metal, unrecognizable. It took hours to separate his ashes from the wreckage. His death shocked the Soviet space program into a complete overhaul. Flight stopped for 18 months, while engineers fixed hundreds of ignored safety problems. Komarov remains the first person to die on a space mission, honored with monuments and memorials across Russia. Forever remembered as the cosmonaut who bore the weight of 2 lives. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe for similar ones, and feel free to drop suggestions for the next video in the comments.